Hello and welcome to Inside Edition, where we discuss national, regional and international issues in depth. Held under the patronage of the Oil and Environment Minister and Special Envoy for Climate Affairs, Dr. Mohammed bin Dana, the day-long Middle East Sustainability Forum Business Transition to Net Zero, the path towards a successful low-carbon future, gathered recently here in the Kingdom. More than 300 decision-makers and sustainability experts to discuss regional decarbonization and share experiences and solutions for helping the private sector mobilize and implement strategies for achieving net zero goals. This comes in line with the Kingdom of Bahrain's keen interest to enrich the understanding of all sectors related to energy, environment and climate change, building on sustainable development achievements and doubling efforts in the coming years.
So this is a great opportunity, this first conference in the Kingdom of Bahrain on sustainability. This is a topic that's of interest to governments, to private and public businesses, and it's something that we all need to be interested in, talking about and coming up with solutions for.
We're delighted to be here as Gulf International Bank. This is an initiative that we stand fully behind. We think it's about time that Bahrain takes its rightful position at the very forefront of the ESG movement in the region. We believe in the cause. We believe that Bahrain is very, very capable and very well and uniquely positioned to lead this effort in the region. And this conference is hopefully will be the start of a march forward, a journey towards a much better future for the region when it comes to ESG, the environment, social and governance efforts that are taking hold globally.
I'd like to touch upon very briefly on the importance of shared responsibility when it comes to the importance of transition. Net zero transition is a collaborative effort that all organizations must work collaboratively and together in order to achieve such ambitions. It's very important to build the capacity so that the individuals as well as the organizations can achieve such ambitious goals.
Welcome back. Joining me here in the studio is the Managing Director of Finmark Communications and Middle East Sustainability Forum's founder and organizer, Ms. Leila Danish. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
This forum has been in the forefront of a lot of the newspapers, the feeds that we have on social media platforms, and a lot of people know what it's about but don't really know what's behind it, how much work is put into it. So before we start off, can you tell us a little bit about the forum's establishment, its organization, how it's set up?
Sure. We started to realize, we're a communications company and we work with a lot of global, regional companies, financial institutions. And, for the past several years, sustainability and ESG has been a buzzword, and, more and more people are bringing that into, their strategies and their goals. And so, we really thought that we would like to put together an event to support their vision, the government's vision in terms of sustainability. Bahrain's Vision 2030 has really targeted, clean, green, sustainable growth. And, net zero has become a buzzword that we started to realize, people maybe didn't quite understand what it meant. So what we wanted to do was put together a forum that would help people understand, what net zero means for businesses, what the decarbonization journey for businesses is, to help mobilize private sector action on decarbonization, and really help give people the tools to start to think about how they're going to do this and how they're going to implement these strategies.
Absolutely. When we look at topics like low carbon, green buildings, or anything that really has to do with sustainability, there's so much research put into it, and there are so many ways that researchers and experts have eased the way for companies to really get started on getting to that target. But specifically low carbon fuel future. That's something that Bahrain has promised itself and has promised the world. What is the importance of organizing an event or a forum such as this to spread the awareness that you're talking about low carbon futures?
I mean, as I said, so there is a lot of information out there for sure, and there are a lot of tools and technologies to, for people to transition their business models and their operations. But I think the issue is, unless you're a very big company, globally and in the region, people haven't really started, SMEs, for example, smaller companies, have thought that this really only applies to, industries where there's a lot of emissions. They don't think, me as a communications company, what is my carbon footprint? We all have a carbon footprint. Yes. All of our businesses do. So really what we thought with this forum is to help educate people for, across sectors. Every sector has a carbon footprint, every business. And if the government is going to meet these targets that were set, for example, by 2060, the government can set the target, but ultimately it's businesses that have to decarbonize, for net zero to become a reality. So what we wanted to do was, set up a conference, and education and actually practical learning is a big part of what we decided, we wanted the focus to be, so that people can actually start to walk away with some tips and strategies on, how do you start to look at your carbon footprint? How do you start to measure your scope 1, 2, 3 emissions? What does that even mean, for various kinds of businesses? And then practical steps, how they can walk away from this conference and, start to do these things.
Right. Way before COVID hit the planet, digitalization was part of the sustainable growth of a lot of sectors, going into technology and reducing that carbon footprint when it came to transportation, when it came to educational processes as well. And educational processes have changed. We have interactive workshops that are online. That's during COVID, but it was made possible because of the journey before that when it came to sustainability.
Sure.
And in this forum, you guys have addressed a lot of these educational opportunities, or you have created them for the people. So it comprises of a series of keynote addresses, panel sessions, and interactive workshops. What can you tell us about the agendas and the activities that are available at the forum?
Sure. I mean, we have, we have a number of keynote addresses where we're going to have, we have senior experts talking about, some of the key components of the transition. So funding the transition, regulation that's required to really make this transition happen, the collaborations that are necessary between the private sector, and the public sector. Financing is a really, really big part of this because it is an expensive process, who is going to help, fund this transition, and we need the banks obviously to step up in that regard. The workshops, as you said, I mean, that's, we have 4 workshops which are being led by experts. So we have BIBF doing a workshop, we have Deloitte Middle East doing one, E&Y, and KPMG. So these are, some of the world's best consultants, and they're top people who are, helping, global companies, regional companies, set sort of pathways and strategies for their transition. So all of this is being made available to the attendees of the conference. And, these are going to be actually very sort of targeted practical guides for, how do you look at your business and what are the steps that you can take when you walk away from, these workshops to start putting yourself on this path to net zero.
Right. When you start creating this agenda and the activities that go with it, what did you base the research on? I mean, was it on what Bahrain needs as a country? Is it the region? Is it a global call to this is what's needed to do in order to reach these sustainable goals?
So, I mean, in putting together, in designing the program, we really, as I said, wanted to look at where the sort of education and awareness gaps were, okay. And also to think about the critical components. So, as I said, critical to the transition, let's say, is, understanding what the targets are. So the private sector needs to understand, what are the expectations? What are these targets that have been set? And then, their role in helping to make this a reality. Secondly, we looked at funding. You need to really figure out, if I'm going to change my business model, invest in the company, to make it more green, to make it more efficient. What do I need to invest in? Do I need to invest in technologies? Do I need to overhaul, how I do certain processes? And all of that, requires funding. So funding became a really central pillar of what we wanted to talk about. Regulations did. Energy transition obviously is super important, and the integration of renewables. So that was something that we put on the agenda. You mentioned green buildings, and infrastructure is very, very important. Infrastructure is one of the industries that is probably the most carbon intensive. Yeah. So thinking about when you build buildings, whether it's commercial, residential, or even industrial, how are you going to start to use more low carbon materials in this? So this will also be a key component of what we're doing. And then, as we said, the education piece is a really big part of what we wanted to design and work around. And we were very, very lucky to get, these experts who were willing to, lead these workshops.
Yeah. Not only did the forum have a lot of experts running the panels as well as the keynote addresses, but also the actual participation of people at the forum was vast. How do you value that kind of participation, that many people coming to it and participating?
I mean, this was the inaugural edition of the forum. And so, from the get-go, actually, given the fact this was the first time we were doing it, it was, new to the kingdom. We had so much support from partners who wanted to get involved in, helping us make this a reality, contributing to the agenda, contributing to the topics, contributing speakers and, and thoughts. As well as, the participation. We saw nearly 400, senior business leaders and sustainability experts attend. So, the response, I think, underscores how important this topic is and how much, I guess, what a thirst there is for people to sort of gain knowledge, share ideas, and, to educate themselves on, what net zero and decarbonization means and how they can progress it within their own businesses and organizations.
Right. When we talk about any kind of target or goal that is on a national level such as this, we talk about the kind of collaboration between the private sector and the government sector or the public sector. And organizing a forum like this really reflects how the private sector's belief in the pivotal role of the environment is achieving sustainable development. What can you tell us about this sector's vital contribution to achieving the forum's goals?
I mean, the private sector, as I said, the government has set a target for, for 2060 for, lowering emissions and getting to net zero. But ultimately, it's businesses and citizens that need to do their part. And, the amount of support we had from, the private sector, from private sector partners and sponsors, to the participants, to, businesses really representing all industries who were eager to take part. I think shows that the private sector is, very, very eager to play their role and, to learn and to help, move the country towards its goals.
Yeah. And for you to achieve your goals, you had strategic partners that were a part of creating this forum. So what can you tell us about the value of their support in creating this forum?
Sure, it was, it was enormous, enormous value to us, and also, to the participants. We had, as lead partners, we had Standard Chartered and Infracorp, both who are playing pioneering roles in their various industries. Infracorp is an infrastructure, and obviously Standard Chartered is a big global bank. Yeah. They've both, set standards in their own businesses, for sustainable development and decarbonization. We also had Gulf International Bank, National Bank of Bahrain, ALBA, and we also had partners from the government sector, Economic Development Board, and Temkeen. So, we had a broad support base, and, these are all people who themselves and their businesses are very committed to sustainability and decarbonization, and also, I think they're committed to helping their clients, their customers, their supply chain. So really, they set an example from the top for us.
Definitely. Well, before we continue our studio discussion, we want to highlight one specific part that you have mentioned, the Gulf International Bank, or one specific sponsor, the Gulf International Bank, how they are leaders in sustainability and an ESG partner of the forum. As a vital participant, the bank actually shared its experience and know-how to help in raising the awareness and support towards regional decarbonization efforts. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, and to tell us more information about that, we are pleased to be joined through phone by the CEO of the Gulf International Bank, Mr. Jamal Al-Kishi. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Jamal.
It's a pleasure. Delighted to be here.
Sir, first off, what can you tell us about your participation at the panel of senior representatives from global and regional financing institutions to discuss specifically the financial sector and funding the transition?
Yeah, we're delighted and honored to take part in this event. I think it's a personal privilege, an honor to help out in this effort. I think we do this believing in the cause of sustainability, believing in the bank's critical role in financing sustainability-linked projects and initiatives, and hopefully this will help in terms of positioning Bahrain, this wonderful home of ours, as perhaps the hub, hopefully the hub of green finance for the region.
Mr. Al-Kishi, also, what can you tell us about GIB's comprehensive sustainability strategy and the support for the issuance of green financing instruments specifically?
Well, as far as GIB is concerned, sustainability is core to our identity, who we are as a firm, and the way we operate and the way we carry out our business. It is embedded in all of our business principles, policies, strategies, and all of them are built on a sincere commitment to sustainability in general and responsible banking. We were the first Bahraini-based financial institution and Saudi-owned financial institution to raise a sustainability-linked, ESG-linked financing. We continue to do so and innovate in that space. We've done the first repo financing for a financial institution that is ESG-linked, recently with a global counterpart. But that's on financing our own balance sheet. In terms of dealing with clients, we continue to promote and encourage our clients to adopt green financing, ESG financing of their own businesses with a very pronounced skew on our part towards finding opportunities to support ESG-related projects and opportunities. This desire of ours is not a short-termist or a marketing or sales-driven initiative. It is a very, very sincere and genuine commitment by the bank, its shareholders, board, and management and team to make sure that we do our part in terms of what needs to be done globally towards saving the planet, and acting very, very responsibly for obviously all of us and for future generations and for this region in particular.
Right. Before we started today's show, me and Ms. Danish were talking about the vast field of sustainable development. There are so many topics coming up and research is being done on net zero emissions, as well as in the real estate sector, and now also in financing. Green financing is a big topic. What can you tell us about GIB's future plans and upcoming projects to continue achieving its goals in this regard?
So you will see us hopefully intensifying and accelerating efforts in terms of our green finance initiatives with clients, with projects in the region that are green in nature, that are sustainability linked. We will continue to do our level best to lend a very meaningful helping hand to these projects, not only by providing financing from our own balance sheet, but also helping arrange and coordinate the capital raise required to take these projects into reality. We will also continue to fund ourselves in a manner that is ESG linked to the maximum extent possible. And this is not something that is limited to the green initiatives. We have also the social and governance agendas. We promote wholeheartedly causes such as the promotion of women in the workplace, opportunities for women to grow professionally and achieve much higher objectives in the workplace, and promote women's participation in the progress that is being achieved in the region. That is a cause that is near and dear to our heart, and we continue to apply whatever levers we have at our disposal to promote that cause. Same thing applies with obviously governance issues, but I think between the environment and social causes, including, like I said, the promotion of women and women's participation, but also areas like education, healthcare, and other areas. And I think it's incumbent upon not just GIB but all of us in the banking community to do our part. I know that regulators in the region are also putting forth agendas and targets, but I think us as players in this field ought to do our part and ought to do it with a great deal of enthusiasm, knowing that this is existential for all of us, not just in terms of survival of the planet, but also in terms of commercial success and viability.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Jamal Al-Kishri, for being with us. Mr. Jamal is the CEO of the Gulf International Bank, and also we wish you all the best in achieving these very complex pathways to these goals you have set for yourself. We will continue our discussion right after this short break. Welcome back. We're back in the studio and we will continue our discussion here with our guest, who is the Managing Director of Finmark Communications and Middle East Sustainability Forum's founder and organizer, Leila Danish. Listening a little bit to Mr. Al-Kishi and of all the efforts that not just GIB, but banking sector in general are putting into achieving ESGs, what are your comments on what he said?
Yeah, I mean, GIB has obviously done a lot. As he said, they've been a pioneer in the issuance of sustainability-linked, financing instruments. Infracorp, who is also one of our partners, I think they were the first Bahraini entity to issue a green sukuk this year. So it's not even just the financing sector. It is a lot of companies. Alba, another partner of ours, is issued sustainability-linked financing instruments. So this is a real trend and a real focus. And as Mr. Al-Kishi said, they are banks are encouraging their clients to use these types of instruments, and there seems to be a lot of demand and appetite for it, from issuers and also from investors.
Right. When we were talking about these strategic partners, I mean, you've mentioned the banking sector, you've also mentioned the industrials, like you mentioned, I mean, Alba, Noga, and these other companies. What can you tell us about the importance of these big companies being a part of an important forum like this?
Sure. I mean, and as I said, these bigger companies that we mentioned now, and also, throughout the region, they really are at the forefront. They are the ones who are setting the standards and, have been, early movers, in terms of looking at their operations and decarbonizing. As they do so, they are working with their supply chains, with their partners, with their customers. So the impact that these large companies have, is massive. They're in the forum, really sharing the experiences and the success stories of what they've been doing. And we hope that has inspired, smaller companies, SMEs, to think about how they're going to start these journeys themselves.
Yes. What are the expected recommendations and outcomes of the forum, and what procedures are fit to implement them?
Well, I mean, the outcome really, our aim was to ensure that we gave people the opportunity to, build their knowledge base and awareness of what net zero actually is, what the decarbonization journey, as we said, of companies and success stories in the region are, things they can emulate and follow. And then really the workshops, were where we have the takeaways, I guess, is, the attendees took part in these 4 workshops over 2 days. And what, we hope is that, the things that they learned, how to start to measure their, carbon footprint, how to start looking at, where they can make immediate reductions, start to do the planning for how they can implement these things as they go forward in terms of changing their business models to a low carbon business model and really implementing that in their operations. So we hope they're going to go away and start to, come up with these strategies and plans and, take steps forward.
Yeah. We've been touching over the length of today's show on how the government really partakes in sustainability, in achieving ESGs. The reality is that the Kingdom of Bahrain, the government of the Kingdom of Bahrain has set the goal, as you have said. But from your point of view, what can you tell us about how the Kingdom exerted efforts to achieve net zero emissions by 2060?
Sure. I mean, as I said, the Vision 2030, which guides everything that, the government is doing, has really put, green, clean, sustainable growth at the heart, of its strategy. And I think that's, a huge thing. I mean, that sort of sets the vision from the top, and, the private sector, has that as a guide. It's, where they invest. Renewables has been a real, focal point, I think, for the government. They've announced, I think, that by 2035 they want to double the use and adoption of renewable energy sources, and they're working towards that. I think fundamentally for each of the economy sectors, they have set strategies. The ministries have. They're involved with working across with various stakeholder groups. So I think a lot is being done from the top, and hopefully that's trickling down, and more of that will be happening, in the years to come.
Yes, hopefully. The government of Bahrain also constantly supports harmonizing the decarbonization efforts with global endeavors. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, the government, plays a key role at COP, which is the UN's, global climate meeting that happens annually. Interestingly, this year it happened in November of 2022 in Egypt. And it will happen in November of 2023 in the UAE. So, 2 years, one after another, we have the major global climate meets in the region. Bahrain has taken part in all of these and, really announced and bolstered its commitments at these meetings. So I think, Bahrain has a very, very good platform that is even more important now as the whole world sort of looks at the region over these next 2 years for these COPs.
Right. From your experience and from your personal perspective, how do you see the future of achieving decarbonization goals on a local level and on an international level?
I mean, obviously, everyone is very hopeful, but these are, difficult and, complex challenges. More collaboration is needed. That's, for sure. And, more financing is needed. More regulation is probably needed. But, I think that everyone is going in the right direction. And certainly, the support we got and interest in this forum shows that, the will is there both in the private sector and the public sector. So hopefully collaborating, together in a more effective way over these next years will show, positive results.
Definitely, and this forum was really a novel way to start off the awareness into these specific sustainable and environmental sustainable goals. Thank you very much for being with us today and for answering our questions, and congratulations again on the success of the forum.
Thank you very much.
And we'd also like to thank you, dear viewers, for watching us, and we'll see you next week in another episode of Inside Edition.